What if the most terrifying part of Kurukshetra began after the war was already decided? Duryodhana lies broken. The Kaurava dream is finished. The battlefield should finally be moving towards silence. But beside that defeat stands Ashwatthama, a son carrying humiliation, grief, and fury so raw that one last night will make victory itself feel contaminated. This is why Ashwatthama matters so much to the Mahabharata's ending. He does not fight like a man seeking justice. He moves like a wound that has decided pain must spread. His father Drona is dead. His side is destroyed. His king is collapsing in the dust. And instead of asking what ruin should teach, Ashwatthama asks only one question: how can defeat still be made to hurt the enemy more? To understand that fury, we have to remember what Ashwatthama has just lost. He is not only Drona's son. He is Drona's pride, Drona's continuation, Drona's unfulfilled answer to a world ruled by kings and warriors. When Drona falls through deception and despair, Ashwatthama does not experience it as one more battlefield death. He experiences it as the collapse of identity itself. Kripa and Kritavarma are there with him, survivors of a cause that has already failed. They can see the war is lost. They can see the night is unstable. Yet what makes the moment unforgettable is not strategy alone. It is psychology. 3 men remain, but only one is ready to turn the end of war into the beginning of something even more dishonorable. And that creates the real hook of the story. The Mahabharata has already shown open combat, heroic vows, and civilizational collapse. So why does it still need Ashwatthama's last night? Because the epic wants to ask a harder question. When the battlefield ends, does hatred end with it, or does hatred become most dangerous when rules, witnesses, and daylight all disappear? Ashwatthama's mind keeps returning to Drona. Not to his father's greatness in peace, but to the way he was broken in war. Drona laid down his weapons after hearing that his son was dead. That half-truth shattered his will before arrows shattered his body. Ashwatthama now treats the whole enemy victory as stained by that moment, and stained victory invites retaliatory stain in return. Then comes the omen the story never lets us forget. Ashwatthama sees an owl descend on sleeping crows and tear through them in darkness. The image is savage, efficient, and dishonorable. But that is exactly why it grips him. Daylight battle has already failed him. The owl teaches another rule, or rather the removal of rules: strike when the enemy sleeps, and victory becomes murder disguised as tactic. This is the turning point. Ashwatthama stops being only a bereaved son and becomes an inventor of a final outrage. The night creature does not give him wisdom. It gives him permission. He reads violence in nature and calls it destiny. But the Mahabharata is careful here. It shows us the omen not to excuse him, but to reveal how easily a desperate mind can turn symbol into authorization. When Ashwatthama proposes the raid, even his companions hesitate. Kripa knows what war permits and what it pollutes. Kritavarma knows that desperate sides tell themselves many stories in defeat. Yet the plan advances anyway, because exhausted men often drift where certainty is strongest. And Ashwatthama's certainty is terrible. He no longer seeks victory in battle. He seeks a wound the Pandavas will never forget. Now the episode tightens. Open war is gone. Trumpets are gone. Heroic speeches are gone. In their place stands a sleeping camp, vulnerable precisely because it believes the worst is over. That contrast is what makes the coming violence so disturbing. Ashwatthama is not about to test strength against strength. He is about to attack trust, exhaustion, and the simple human assumption that night might finally mean rest. Once Ashwatthama enters the camp, the moral language of battle collapses almost instantly. There is no duel here, no fair challenge, no recognition between worthy enemies. There is only approach, surprise, and the crushing advantage of wakefulness over sleep. The Mahabharata does not romanticize this. It wants us to feel the coldness of a man who has decided the enemy's defenselessness is exactly what makes the revenge sufficient. His rage focuses first on Duryodhana, the warrior born to kill Drona. That detail matters. Ashwatthama is not acting in random frenzy. He is pursuing symbolic repayment. But even that targeted revenge degenerates immediately, because vengeance rarely stays as narrow as it promises. Once a person grants himself permission to abandon restraint, the list of acceptable victims begins to widen with terrifying speed. The camp erupts into confusion, but confusion is not resistance. Men wake into death before they can gather command or formation. The contrast with Kurukshetra's daylight war is brutal. Heroes who survived 18 days of combat now die without line, signal, or preparation. And that is the point. Ashwatthama wants the Pandava victory to feel hollow, unsafe, and permanently vulnerable even in the hour after success. Kripa and Kritavarma become part of the machine by guarding the camp's edges. This matters because atrocity is rarely the work of one furious mind alone. It also requires those who do not fully believe, yet still help. The Mahabharata preserves that discomfort. Revenge is not only a personal fire. It becomes a system the moment other hands make its execution easier. By the end of the raid, the war's final night has become morally darker than many of its open battles. This is no longer the story of courage under pressure. It is the story of a man proving that pain can be used as fuel for disgrace. And the Mahabharata sharpens the wound one step further, because Ashwatthama still has not reached the cruelty that will define how later generations remember this night. Among the dead are the sons of Draupadi, the next generation born from a war already crowded with inherited pain. Their deaths are what turn the raid from ruthless tactic into unforgettable moral horror. The Mahabharata makes us feel the obscenity of killing not merely the day's opponents, but the fragile future that remained after the fighting should have been done. Whether Ashwatthama mistakes them in the dark or simply accepts them as sufficient substitutes, the result is the same. Revenge now reaches children. This is the exact point where the logic of retaliation reveals its final emptiness. The sons did not kill Drona. The sons did not defeat Duryodhana. Yet grief without restraint begins to treat bloodline itself as guilt, and that is how civilization collapses into vendetta. Dawn brings no relief, only revelation. Draupadi, who has already carried humiliation, exile, and war, now receives news that her sons are gone after the victory she waited so long to see. That emotional reversal is essential. The Mahabharata will not let triumph remain clean for even one night. It insists that vengeance keeps generating new mourners long after armies think the score has been settled. Draupadi demands answer, and Arjuna moves to pursue Ashwatthama with Krishna beside him. But now another pressure enters the story. How do you punish a crime born from unbearable loss without becoming captive to the same fever? The epic has not finished its lesson. It still needs to show what happens when revenge, once unleashed, refuses to stop even after exposure and pursuit. Ashwatthama can flee the camp, but he cannot flee the meaning of what he has done. The story narrows from massacre to reckoning. And the key question becomes sharper than ever. Has he achieved revenge, or has he only proved that the war has succeeded in reproducing its own madness inside the survivors? The answer arrives in one final escalation, where even divine weapons are pulled into the aftershock of hatred. When Arjuna reaches him, Ashwatthama does not surrender into remorse. He escalates again. Cornered minds often reveal their deepest pattern, and his pattern is simple now: if ordinary revenge failed to satisfy, then greater destruction must. That is why the end of his story matters so much. The night raid was not an accident of anger. It was part of a self that keeps choosing devastation whenever humiliation feels intolerable. Ashwatthama unleashes the Brahmashura, and Arjuna answers with the same terrible level of force. Suddenly the war threatens to outgrow even its own ending. This is the Mahabharata's final warning about escalation. Once revenge loses proportion, it starts demanding weapons that can wound the future itself. Personal grievance begins reaching for civilizational extinction. Ashwatthama's weapon is turned toward Uttara's womb, toward the unborn child who carries the future of the Pandava line. That detail makes the logic of revenge unmistakable. It is not enough for hatred to kill warriors. It wants to erase succession, continuity, and tomorrow. Krishna's intervention matters because the epic refuses to let the future be fully handed over to the fury of the defeated. Then comes the punishment that fits the crime better than death would have. Ashwatthama is cursed to live on, separated from honor, from belonging, and from the clean ending warriors imagine for themselves. The jewel is taken from him, but the deeper loss is spiritual. He becomes a reminder that some acts do not make a person fear dying. They make him fear what he has become while still alive. That is why Ashwatthama's last night of revenge feels so dark. It proves that winning a war is not the same as ending violence, and losing with pride can become more destructive than losing with grief. The Mahabharata leaves us with a hard lesson: revenge that crosses moral limits does not restore the dead, it only keeps the dead ruling the living. If this episode helped you see the Mahabharata more deeply, like this video, subscribe to EkalavyaLearn, and turn on the bell icon to get new videos on time. Next, Drona's story asks an even sharper question: was he guided by duty, pride, or attachment?